Welcome to Annapolis Mosaics. Our program spotlights people in our community who are involved in activities designed to promote good human relations. I am Michael Keller, the chair of the Annapolis Human Relations Commission and your host. The commission is a city board that seeks to promote equal opportunity and to eliminate discrimination. My guests today are Shannon Leap, who is the Anne Arundel County Field Organizer for Food and Water Watch, and Elliot Abhow, who is a volunteer and advocate for the organization. Welcome, Shannon and Elliot, to Annapolis Mosaics.
Thank you.
Well, could you tell our viewers what the mission and vision of Food and Water Watch is?
Yeah, Food and Water Watch is a national organization. We have offices all over the country, and our mission is to advocate for clean water and healthy food for everyone, because it's truly a human right to have access to those things.
Okay. Could you tell our viewers also a little bit about your history? How, when, and why did you get started?
Food and Water Watch started about 10 years ago as a public consumer protection organization, and has since kind of grown nationally. We are based in Washington, D.C., and we advocate for clean water and healthy food for all through the democratic process. So we really advocate for fixing social problems while fixing our democracy at the same time.
Okay, and you've started to allude to this. I'm going to give you a chance to get a little bit more in detail on it. I mean, your organization, if you look at your website, it actually promotes 4 specific values: independence, democracy, human rights, and sustainability. So could you elaborate on the importance of each of these to the mission of your organization?
Well, fostering a strong sense of democracy is definitely an important part of Food and Water Watch's work, since we definitely target legislatures and politicians and the people that represent us in our society. And we use that as the avenue through which to make change, as opposed to targeting corporations or more privately held organizations. And so that also creates a sustainable democratic system as well. And so that's where sustainability comes in, as in addition to environmental sustainability. And that is also something that is a human right, as where human rights comes in. And because everyone has the human right to have access to healthy food and clean water.
Okay, very good. Let's talk a little bit about the specific campaigns that Food and Water Watch engage in. Nationally, I know there's some also that you focus on here in Maryland, and we'll talk about those. And many of these are campaigns that our viewers aren't going to be really familiar with, and so they're going to want some detail about what these things are about. You can never overstate some of the details that are involved, because most people aren't that tuned into all the political issues that go on. And so this is an opportunity to, I think, acquaint them with these. I think one of your issues that you work on nationally, and perhaps here in Anne Arundel County, is called Ban Fracking Everywhere. What's that all about?
So fracking, for those who don't know, is a highly invasive and problematic source of attaining shale oil, which is deep in the ground. And there is fracking happening across America from California to here in Maryland, though Maryland did pass a 2-year moratorium, I believe, a year ago, which is great news. Yeah, so fracking is an inherently dangerous form of attaining energy and fossil fuels, and it also perpetuates our reliance on fossil fuels. So Food and Water Watch has a strong position against fracking on private and public lands.
What makes fracking hazardous to food and water?
So when oil companies drill into the ground, it uses hundreds of thousands and even millions of gallons of water. So it uses a lot of water, which we simply should not be dedicating towards something like fracking. And in addition to using all of that water, it also has a really toxic wastewater, which can get into our groundwater systems, in our aquifers, and even be released into our rivers and streams and pollute our entire water system. And as in regards to food as well, there's been instances in California where fracking wastewater has been used to irrigate crops, and that's certainly we don't want water that's contaminated with things like known carcinogens, like really toxic chemicals. They're not things that should be irrigating our food or be making their way into our waterways and communities. So that is why that fracking should be banned everywhere.
And you made
There was also an amazing film shown by a member of Peace Action that showed the residents of Pennsylvania whose land had been fracked, who could show in real time, turning on the faucets and having flames come out. Mm-hmm. They could show particularly the children and the animals getting sick. Mm-hmm. It was just a devastating thing to watch and realize that these people were being completely ignored by policymakers.
You know, with you mentioned, Shannon, earlier that there's been a moratorium in Maryland on this. Could you provide our viewers a little bit more detail? What does this moratorium do? And once the time for the moratorium is expired, where will we be there? As you know, we've had a change in governors in Maryland, and they have different views on this issue. And to what extent will that impact where we go from here on fracking in the state? Where are we now? Where are we going?
So I'm not 100% familiar with the fracking situation in Maryland, so Elliot may be able to fill in some of the gaps, but if not, that's okay. What I can say is that there's a 2-year moratorium on fracking in Maryland, which means it's a temporary ban. And a lot of the times, governments will do this to kind of put a pause on things while they do more research on the effects of fracking, both environmentally, public health-wise, economically. And so once the 2-year moratorium is up, it'll be, I guess, time to make another decision. And depending on who is in office at that point, it'll be really important for the people of Maryland to make their voices heard on this issue, because fracking is definitely something that the citizens of Maryland, definitely something they don't need to put up with in their state.
Yeah, let's move on to another issue that Food and Water Watch works on in terms of a campaign. And that's called Let Us Decide, Label GMOs, or Let Me Decide, Label GMOs. What are GMOs, and what's involved that you're talking about letting people decide?
Food and Water Watch's position on genetically modified organisms, which is what GMOs are, is that consumers have the right to know what's in their food and have the right to decide whether or not they want to consume GMOs. And currently, food companies are not required to put those labels on their product. And so consumers are kind of left in the dark about what it is, whether or not there are GMOs, in fact, in their food.
One of the things missing is natural nutrients in these products. And these are being fed also to the animals that people eat. They're being fed to the chickens that lay the eggs that people eat. So there's also a cascade of effect. And I also think that nobody would fight that hard for something to convince anybody else if they didn't know there was a problem.
Mm-hmm. There are a number of states that have taken steps toward requiring the labeling of GMOs, and some of these efforts have been actually challenged in court by the food companies. Has there been any movement in the state of Maryland toward passing legislation that would require that products containing GMOs be labeled?
Not that I'm aware. I don't know if you've been active on anything.
No, we've asked some of the people who work at Whole Foods, who may know more than anybody else, and there doesn't seem to be any evidence yet that any action's taken to let Marylanders know what they're eating.
So really what you're saying is not as much advocating the outlawing of GMOs, but just simply labeling it so that people have an opportunity, if they want to avoid the product, they can do that. If you're just simply saying if the companies are including this element in food, that people at least should be aware of it. That's really what you're advocating.
That's absolutely a first step so that people can make a decision. And I think it shows up greatly in weight gain, because you're not getting the same nourishment for the product that you think you're getting.
Mm-hmm. Could you elaborate a little bit more on this, Elliot? The reason I ask is because unlike the issue of climate change, where 95% or more of all climate scientists say that the Earth is warming and it's due to human activity, you've got a flip on with respect to GMOs. You've got, according to National Geographic, around 80% or more of scientists say there's no problem with GMOs. They don't take a position on the issue of the issue of labeling, but they say, there's no problem here with GMOs. Are you suggesting that there are?
I'm strongly suggesting that there are. As somebody that has worked with animals all my life, one of the things that we're seeing is that animals are, first of all, being kept in conditions that don't allow them to grow healthy, and it's the muscle that we're eating, so we need that to be an animal that's eating well and moving well. They're kept contained, they're being fed non-food, and they're being kept in situations where often there are sick and dead animals among the group that are not vetted out. So it's that what is happening is it's non-food that is being fed to the food that we eat and is being used in more places than even Shannon and I have been able to find.
Okay, we're going to take a break now, but when we return, I'll be talking with Shannon and Elliot about some of the additional campaigns that Food and Water Watch is involved with. We're talking today with Shannon Leap and Elliot Abhow of Food and Water Watch. And another campaign that you're involved with is called Stop TPP, or that's a Trans-Pacific Partnership. It's a major trade deal that President Obama has been advocating and seeking to get through Congress. But you're against it. You're saying stop it. Why do you advocate that, and how does that relate to food and water?
To be honest, that's a newer campaign that Food and Water Watch is working on, and I'm not as well versed on the logistics of it, so I wouldn't be able to speak on that. I don't know if Elliot would want to say anything about the TPP in particular, but I wouldn't be able to articulate Food and Water Watch's take on everything.
Okay. Are you able to, Elliot?
I don't think I can give it.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll move on to another campaign issue, and that is public water for all. Are you familiar with that one? Or?
I could speak a little bit about it.
Okay. All right. Let's hear it. Let's hear about that.
So, like I said, I'm from California, and this is something that we are really battling or fighting for in California is public water for all, because there are a number of private water companies that are, namely Nestle is the big one, that are taking our public water and putting it in bottles and plastic water bottles and selling it for just way more money than it's worth, and changing the balance between who has access to water. And that's really quite a problem because, like I said, everyone has the human right to have access to water. And when these private companies threaten that, that is certainly a problem.
Well, one of the things I heard the other day on NPR was that there are Chinese owners of cattle who are raising them in a place that's not designed for them to be raised, and they are actually paying people in California to sell the water for them to grow hay to then ship back to China. And that's the kind of confusion in almost all of these matters, is that the trail tends to be long, and it takes a while to unwind it and to find out what's actually going on. So here is a state that is doing itself in the matter of water and not having paid attention, that is still finding a way to earn some money by selling water through this hay to China to feed cows that they cannot feed because it's not a country that really can raise cows.
You will move on to another campaign issue, and that's one that says save antibiotics. What does antibiotics have to do with food and water?
Quite a bit.
Okay.
So in the state of our food system currently in America, which is an industrial factory farming system by and large, the way that animals are raised is in very close confines, and they're fed often food that they did not evolve to eat. And in these conditions, animals are quite prone to disease, and so big agriculture corporations have taken to giving antibiotics to their animals prophylactically, so to prevent disease, but that's not what antibiotics are for. And this has created superbacteria, and that superbacteria that exists on animal farms actually makes its way into our entire environment, because people work at farms, people work at our farms, and then they go home to their families, and they bring with them on their clothes these superbacteria, totally, I mean, unknowingly and unable to do anything about it to prevent it. And then the way our food distribution system works, a cow that's raised in Colorado can be eaten anywhere in the country and sometimes even the world. And so the superbacteria that are born in Colorado can actually travel to great lengths and make its way all over the country. And this has really had a large public health impact, because it's made the antibiotics that we take to cure really simple things like this isn't simple, but I have a colleague who actually had MRSA, and her antibiotics stopped working because we've been exposed to the superbacteria that I've been referring to is actually antibiotic resistant bacteria, and so I think the number is okay. So 23,000 people a year actually die from antibiotic resistant diseases, and that is deplorable, because those are diseases that we have cures for, and only 20% of our antibiotics that are produced in the country are going towards humans, and the other 80% are going towards factory farm raised animals.
Which also creates more pollution, because as these animals eliminate, all of that is then passing through into the earth. So it's a cascade problem of huge dimension.
You have a campaign called Take Back the Tap. Could you tell our viewers what that's about? Take Back the Tap.
Yeah, I can briefly go into that. It's related to the water privatization campaigns that the public water for all campaigns that we talked about earlier. And it's basically to reclaim the idea that tap water is in fact clean and can be consumed, and is not something that I believe it's related to as opposed to a plastic water bottle that has really the same contents but is marked up quite a bit.
And then there's a campaign you're working on which has direct relationship to Maryland. I think our viewers are going to find this one interesting. It's the poultry litter incineration campaign. That's a mouthful, and it's a euphemism. So I'm going to let you explain to our viewers what this one's all about and why they need to pay attention, because it's right here in our home state.
Well, as the local Annapolitan, if Elliot wants to take it.
Well, there are several levels. One is that, as often happens or can happen, a law was passed without people who know the subject being able to speak and be heard. So already everybody who listens to the radio has heard about the problems of the runoff into the Chesapeake Bay and the dying off of the oysters. So that's one level. The other level is that these huge warehouse-sized chicken houses have chickens that are kept under lights 24 hours a day, that are fed antibiotics and food to make them fat, make their chests fat in particular, and not necessarily healthy. And then the litter is all in the bottom of the house, and then a front end loader comes and collects all of that, and it's sold as manure, as if it had any potency, but it's full of artificial things. And then the chickens are often born deformed. They peck on one another because they're too close together. You can see in a brilliant movie called Cockfight that's just been out recently of animals in the group, dead, dying, deformed, and this is all part of Purdue and the other manufacturers who have filled the Eastern Shore with this completely cruel and unusual treatment of animals, disaffection of the food that we eat. People can go to the market. I went to Whole Foods to look at the organic eggs, and they were either from Austin, Texas, or from Pennsylvania. So why couldn't we have a market on the Eastern Shore of organic eggs served and sold right here in our state?
Mm-hmm. What would you say, this goes both to Shannon as well as to Elliot, what would you say the greatest accomplishments of Food and Water Watch have been over the last 10 years of your existence? What would you point to that you say, we're really proud that we did this?
Food and Water Watch has had a number of very exciting victories over the course of our 10-year history. Most recently, we were instrumental in helping organize actually the fracking ban, or the fracking moratorium in Maryland, as well as we fought off water privatization, or the threats of water privatization in Chicago. And we were also really instrumental in a lot of the fracking fights across the country. I'd say the biggest victory is me personally, not that I was involved in it, but it was exciting for me to witness, was the fracking ban in New York State, which is the first fracking ban in the country. And as part of a really strong coalition of groups in that state, Food and Water Watch was really excited to make sure that fracking isn't something that's happening in New York. And currently in California, these can't be considered victories yet, but we're running a lot of campaigns against fracking and against water privatization.
I'm sure that many of our viewers are going to want to learn more about Food and Water Watch. How can they learn more about your organization?
I'd say the best way is to go on our website.
What's the website?
It's www.foodandwaterwatch.org. And I'd say locally here, getting in touch with either me or Elliot is a really great way to make your voice heard, and a great way for you to make an impact on issues that impact us all. And you can reach me at 310-894-1665. And I'd be happy to hear from any and all of you. And if Elliot wants to give her contact info.
I will, and also to say that we may be able to help give voice to people that haven't been heard. And that would be really important, because the more of us, the better. My telephone number here in Annapolis is 410-268-2053.
And again, that website was www.foodandwaterwatch, all one word, .org.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for viewing our program today, and please join us again on Annapolis Mosaics. If you would like more information about the Annapolis Human Relations Commission, you can jot down the information on your screen. You can reach us at 410-263-7998 or by email at hrcommission@annapolis.gov. And check out our page at the City of Annapolis website. Go to www.annapolis.gov, click on City Government, then Boards and Commissions, and scroll down to the Human Relations Commission page. And always remember the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who said, "We have flown the skies like birds and swum the seas like fishes, but have yet to learn the simple act of walking the earth as brothers and sisters.